I'll ask you to go with me on the Mentimeter, and I'll just ask you to very briefly tell me a little bit about your happiness right now. I got a little bit of a sense of that in the peer evaluations where you gave me some of you are very happy in your teams and some of you are very upset with your teams or with me, which is all very good, but I want to have like a general understanding of where you are and how you're doing. So we'll start from a very basic question of how do we evaluate happiness? So have a look at this. Try to answer this. So I'm asking you to rate your happiness, and then I'm asking you about happiness generally in life for you, happiness right now, not generally in life, but right now in the class, happiness 10 years from now. You can just guess, estimate, predict, and all that. And then generally in life and right now for the average HKU student. So I want to have some kind of an understanding how you see yourself in comparison to others. And as you're doing this, I think you should start asking yourselves a few questions, which I think are very important for us to tackle in this class, is how do we know how happy we are? So when you give a number, how do you know what that number is? Where does this number come from? I give you a scale between 0 to 100, and I ask you about happiness. So the first thing you want to ask yourself is, what is happiness? How do I know whether I'm happy or not? How do I assess this? How do I put this on a number? How am I able to tell whether somebody else is happy? So when somebody asks me, what is the average HKU happiness? How do I even go about doing this? What do I do? Do I recall some of my friends? Do I think about my stereotype of the HKU student? What are some of the things that we need to do in the social sciences in order to address an issue like happiness? And it seems like happiness is such a loaded term. A lot of people use this for very, very different things. When I talk to my parents about happiness, their meaning of happiness seems to be very different from my own meaning of happiness. So I'll give you a second to go through this. I'll share some of the responses that you already gave. I have to say this is remarkably similar to what I've seen in the previous years regarding the way people rate their happiness. So generally in life, it seems like things are pretty good. We have you definitely on the right side of being happy. Right now, it seems a bit more neutral. So maybe it's somewhere around noon, maybe it's this class, maybe it's you being having to sit and participate in a lecture. 10 years from now, for some reason, you expect yourselves to be slightly less happy than you are right now. So that's something that we can talk about and contemplate, but already a trend. Another thing that you might see from here, which is very interesting for me, is how you compare yourself to the average HKU student. It seems like generally you consider yourself to be happier than the average HKU student. It's not big effects, but you can see something that's fairly noticeable here. I'll give you another quick question. If you have 50 Hong Kong dollars right now to make yourself the happiest, what would be the best way for you to spend these 50 Hong Kong dollars? So we have some ideas here. I'll spend it on myself to buy something I won't usually buy some desserts, buy food. Seems like food is a repeating theme here in Hong Kong. It's like 50 Hong Kong, what can I do? Shopping, buying something, spending on a hobby, have a good meal, yes? Okay. Donate it to a charity. That's an interesting one. That's very different from the other responses that we've had. So it seems like there's a big theme, an intuitive theme of we want to make ourselves happy right now. This is how we're going to spend it. 50 Hong Kong dollars is not a lot. We can't really do very much with it. But we can consider all kinds of different options. And most of the stuff, we see this as something that we should invest in ourselves, but we have one response that at least looks at something that suggests something different. So which one seems to be the better strategy? If you look at all of these, now you've seen what other HKU students, classmates write about how they'll increase happiness. Perhaps it gives you some ideas of something that's better for you. Ice Americano, chocolate, good. So a question that you might want to ask yourself or your classmates is why these things? Why do we think that they'll make us happier? Why is purchasing something, why is possessing something, or why buying something that is sweet, or buying something that is full of caffeine, or buying something that is short-lived will give us the biggest happiness boost possible? Is this going to make us the happiest? Yeah, ice cream seems to be a repeating theme. That's good. But then if you try to recall back the last 50 Hong Kong dollars that you spent that made you happy, is there a difference? Was this about food or was it about something that was different? So try and think about that if you have some responses. Last 50 Hong Kong dollars that you spent that made you happier, what did you spend it on? So sometimes it seems in some of the classes that we have some misalignment between what we think will make us happy and how we actually spend money. So what happens in reality and what happens in our minds sometimes tends to have some kind of a misalignment. So you can contemplate this and see if you have anything to do. And then another thing that we might ask ourselves, some people believe that their lives are going to change completely if they win the lottery. So let's say that you win 100 million Hong Kong dollars. What is it that you're going to change? What are you going to do with this money? How is this going to impact your life or your happiness? And it seems like in our minds, there's something regarding the connection between money and happiness. It seems like we believe that if we gain more money, if we're able to spend more money, then it will make us feel happier. So these are things that you can think about and contemplate. I'll show you a little bit of evidence. I have another class called Judgment Decision Making, where in the last class, we contemplated on the relationship between money and happiness and whether really having more money brings you more happiness. But yeah, I think one of the big claims from Daniel Kahneman from Judgment Decision Making and Behavioral Economics is that money is good up to a point. So it helps increase your happiness up to the middle class. But once you hit middle class, the gains from an additional amount of money are fairly small. So having a big boost in 100 million Hong Kong dollars does not guarantee that you're going to get a lot more happy. Yeah, seems like a lot of long-term stuff, family, tuition, buying an apartment. That's stuff in Hong Kong. That's a big, and health insurance. Yeah, very good. Yeah, interesting. When I give these questions in different parts of the world, I get very different responses. And it's always in Hong Kong, it really seems to be, there's a lot about investment, long-term investment, about family, and definitely about buying a flat, which seems to worry a lot of people. So last thing that we spent, octopus top-up made you happy. Okay, great. Food and drinks, tasty sandwich. So food is a general theme here. Interesting. Thanks for sharing all that. That is great. So in my journey of a few years, I've tried to do what it is that you're supposed to do in your second class. So as a social psychologist, I read a lot of literature on happiness and on well-being and life satisfaction. And I try to make out what is it that's the most solid. And I'll be honest with you, it's difficult for me. Even if somebody as somebody who can read an article and can identify and can quantify evidence and can read meta-analysis, somebody who knows how to establish credibility, it's not easy for me to know what to do with this. So I appreciate it when I get some help. And this is one of the podcasts that I truly appreciate. Not many podcasts get this right, but this podcast is something that I truly think differentiates, stands apart from the rest. And it's called Science Versus. And the nice thing about Science Versus is that they take a very complicated topic almost every week, and they break it apart. And they try to base everything on evidence, on solid evidence. So they give you a list of citations, which you can check at the end in order to verify some of their claims. And they talk to the researchers, and they try to be very humble and very careful about what evidence they cite and the way that they cite this. And many times, they are counterintuitive. So there are some claims, for example, in this case, cold plunges, cold baths. So there's this hype. So they see a hype that's happening on social media, and they try to look at this in depth by talking to the people who do solid evidence on this. So looking at this, this happened last year. October 2023, so exactly a year ago, just before I was giving the happiness section of my course. So I was listening to this, trying to understand what is it that they're claiming. And I have to admit that my happiness course up till a year ago did not include any of these things that they were talking about. So I definitely don't include ice baths in my course, but also there's this point about gratitude. And I've heard a lot of social psychologists talk about gratitude. What does gratitude actually give us? And how does gratitude work? I think that in general, me, myself, in my life, but also in people around me, we don't practice gratitude very much. So I was very curious to look into some of this literature. So I'll demonstrate to you some of the process that I went through in order for you to get some ideas on how you can do your process regarding the second project. So after I heard this episode and how they broke this apart, I looked at all the people who do gratitude, and I was able to identify at least one person who I know very well and whose work I build my research on, who did another podcast interview with a podcast that I also listen to. I don't appreciate it as much as Science Versus, but it is a podcast that tries to get things done well. So it interviews a lot of prominent social psychologists, and this one is called Science Versus. So if you want, you can listen to this over here. And they had this episode almost at the same time as Science Versus about the enemies of gratitude. With an interview of Tom Gilovich, who is this guy over here. Tom Gilovich does a lot of work, very, very interesting about the way that we experience happiness, but the way that people spend their money. And looking at the transcript, I was able to pull this out of that. So I highlighted, marked for you what I thought were the main takeaways from what Tom Gilovich was telling Shankar in Hidden Brain. And this is what he said. Cultivating gratitude enables us to appreciate the wonders of everyday life and leads to a more fulfilling existence. Expressing gratitude and witnessing acts of kindness not only uplift others, but also have a profound impact on our well-being, happiness, and sense of fulfillment. So I was looking at all the ways by which we measured this, the way that we did these experiments. And then I decided that maybe one of the ways to do this is if we can do something like this in the classroom. So I'll demonstrate to you one of the experiments by asking you to do something. And then I'll explain to you what is it that we're doing and why this experiment or why this method of doing that experiment. So many things we can be grateful for. So some people say, let's just write a gratitude list of all the things that we did or managed to do in our lives that we're grateful for. This is a great way to go about this. But of all the evidence that I've seen regarding gratitude, the one that seems the most profound, the one that seems to work the best, the one that has the largest impact, the biggest magnitude, is actually not about things that we did or things that we own or things that we have that we're grateful for, but rather the people that are in our lives that we're grateful for. So what I want you to do as an exercise is to think of one person in your life who you are grateful for, but you've never told that person. For me, it's very easy to think of such people in my life because I have not expressed my gratitude to a lot of people who deserve my gratitude. Yeah? So think of one person who deserves your gratitude, who you're grateful for having in your life, but somebody that you've never told this before. Okay? Think about this for a second. Then the first task that I have for you is please to pause everything that you're doing and then write 2 things that you're most grateful for about this person. So who is the person? And then 2 things that you're most grateful for about this person, okay? Once you have that, I'm asking you to write a 1-paragraph letter, a very short letter, kind of like a text message, a WhatsApp, or an email that could be sent, is not sent, but could be sent, hypothetically, to that person, saying these 2 things that you're grateful for. So if, for example, it's a parent, you can say, dear parent, mom or dad, thank you, I'm grateful for you in your life. The things that I'm grateful for the most are these 2 things. Just an example. Don't have to follow this example. You can make it more personalized. But take some time. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do this, for you to think about a person, identify 2 things you're grateful for about this person, and then write a 1-paragraph letter to that person. Is the task clear? Do you have any questions about the task? All good? Okay, so I'll give you 5 minutes. Think about this. Please write this down. Take this seriously. As you're going through this, as you're thinking about this, as you're thinking about the person, as you're thinking about the things you're grateful for, as you're writing this letter, think what that letter will do to you, sending that letter, what this letter will do to the other person if you would send that letter and they will receive it. Okay? So think about the connection between what you're writing, what you're experiencing, and happiness. Okay? So I'll give you 5 minutes. So let's stop for now. Hopefully you got a nice letter, 1-paragraph letter. You found a person who you're grateful for, and you were able to identify at least 2 things about that person. Now we have a second stage for that. So already, hopefully you were able to process something, understand something. But now I have another task for you. It's one thing to do this by yourself, sitting alone with your laptop and putting stuff on the keyboard. But it's another thing altogether to tell this to another person, not the person who this is meant for, but to tell this to somebody that you don't know in the classroom. So typically I see you coming into class and sitting in these groups of teams or people that you know, And sometimes one of the things that I think is very unfortunate about our undergraduates is that we don't get to meet a lot of new people in class. We tend to stick to our social groups. Some people claim regarding happiness that one of the things that makes us happy is talking to strangers, connected to somebody who doesn't seem originally like there might be a good fit, but somebody who you saw in class, you never took the time to approach because there was never a good opportunity to meet with that person. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to meet a stranger. Hopefully I'll be able to match you together. And I think a good conversation opener is me giving you the task of sharing who you're grateful for and them sharing with you what they're grateful for. So having some kind of a conversation. So I'll ask you during a 5-minute session for each of you to share a little bit about who you're grateful for, something about your life, about this person, telling that story of who you appreciate, who you're grateful for to somebody who you don't know. Okay? Is it clear what we're going to do? Okay. So we have about 22 people in class. We'll have 11 couplings, right? So I'm going to assign a number to you. So hopefully this will kind of mix you around a little bit. So listen to the number that I'm giving you and see who is the other person who is getting that number, okay? Especially the people who get this first, okay? So your numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Here I'm going to pair with her, okay, with our teaching assistants, with Sandy, okay? You arrived a little bit late, so you'll see together, okay? What was your number? 9, 10, 11, okay? So now look at your partners, see who your partners are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So all those with the same numbers, please find your mates, face each other, and take 5 minutes. First introduce yourself, and then tell the other person who you're grateful for and what are the 2 things that you're grateful for. You can even read the letter that you wrote to them, okay? I'm very curious. So I just want to say first, you get to watch me a lot. I don't get to watch you very often. So it's interesting for me to just be quiet and then look at you interact with each other. What I can tell you from my observation is that I saw a lot of people smiling to each other, and there was generally good vibes in the room. Perhaps some of you know each other, some of you don't know each other, but generally it seemed like a very positive environment. I'm just curious as a beginning, how many of you do not know the other person you're sitting with? Yeah, pretty good matching. So that's pretty great. Okay, thanks for going along with this task. How does it feel to have an opportunity to sit for 5 minutes with somebody that you don't know from the class, to have the opportunity to meet them for the first time? Any thoughts, any feedback on this? How do you feel about this? What comes to mind? What did you experience? Positive, scary, good? Yes, please.
Quite like welcoming people, so like it's very easy to like get along. Talking about people we're grateful for as well. It's like such a lighthearted people. Very interesting, very sweet. Yeah.
Okay, that's terrific. That's very heartwarming to hear. That's great. Good. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts? Things that you felt? So a little bit of nervousness, but then it seems like it was a topic to talk about, and then bubbly personalities, finding some kind of a match, right? That allows for a conversation, right? Anything else? Is it helpful to have a topic to talk about at the beginning? I think it is, right? Some of you are nodding. Yeah. Right. So sometimes it's very scary. Nervousness is higher when we don't have an excuse to talk to another person. So we see these people coming in and out of the classroom. Sometimes we hear them talking in the class, but we never have a chance, even if they're really interesting for us, to reach out, right? Sometimes we feel like we need an excuse. And somehow I feel like HKU, or as an instructor, some of my role to give you these excuses. Because honestly, with all respect to what it is that I have to offer you, I think that your classmates have a lot more to offer you than me. These are people who can remain in your life for much longer and can give you more things. Some people ask me in the midterm evaluations, like, why is everything teamwork? Why is this such a big deal? It's a big deal because a lot of what we do in life is with other people. It is about connections. You think it's about the task. It's not about the task. It's about you working with other people towards a goal. You getting to form a meaningful connection with them. I know sometimes it leads to hardships. Sometimes they piss you off. Sometimes you're frustrated. That's okay. Being able to overcome some of these frustrations is something that's very important in building lasting relationships. So I'm hoping that we'll have more and more opportunities where I can offer you the chance to meet with other people that you don't know beyond your team. So teams you've chosen, I've seen what happens when I assign teams to you. That does not work out. So teams you've chosen for yourself. But hopefully in some of these chances that we have for you to meet other people, you'll give it at least a chance to meet somebody new and hear something about them. So that's great. How was the discussion? How was it to share something that is personal and intimate about you and your life and something that you feel grateful for, someone that you feel great with somebody else who you don't know? How did that feel for you? How many of you would say this was a positive experience for them? Can you raise your hand with it? Yeah. Generally positive, very good. Did somebody experience a negative or a neutral experience with this? No? Raise your hand? No? Okay. So generally, already us sitting alone, reflecting on people who we're grateful for, is already something that gives us a little bit of meaning. Sometimes when I do these exercises, the first time that I did this exercise with myself, I have to say, I got a little bit teary, right? Something that I feel very emotional about. And sometimes I realize the lost chances that I had in relaying this to this person and not doing it. And then reflecting, why is it so difficult for me to tell a person how much I'm grateful for them? Why is it such a big problem for us to reach out to people who we care about and to tell them, to ask them how they're doing and to tell them that we appreciate them, right? So there are major, even if you're very bubbly or extroverted and you're a very social person, to actually tell somebody else what you feel about them and how much you're grateful for them is something that we all find very difficult. But when we reflect on these things, we get emotional. It feels like something meaningful. And often when we give this to the other person, when we tell this to the other person, we get some very positive, warm things in return. We underappreciate just how much people want to hear these kinds of things. You can reflect in your own life when somebody told you how much you mean to them, how that felt for you, right? So that is already a big step. You writing stuff by yourself, but then telling this to another person who you don't know, that makes it even more so, right? So some of you I saw going through some range of emotions. I don't know what you were talking about. A lot of Cantonese in the room, but generally I feel like when people talk about things like that, it's of substance. You can talk about the weather, you can talk about HKU, you can talk about frustrations of the grades in the classroom, but sometimes the most meaningful conversations are about things that we care deeply about. We feel like we might be too vulnerable, we don't want to share things, we keep things on surface level, right? We don't go deep. One of the differences between extroverted and introverts is the need to go deep. So introverts are a little bit more inclined to want to go deep very, very fast and not wanting to stay surface level. But all of us are afraid of going deep. All of us have a lot of limitation in going deep. So we don't give this opportunity to ourselves. Sometimes we need somebody from the outside, like a course instructor, to give us the opportunity to go deeper. And once you share your gratitude for someone, you realize you can go deeper in other things in life. I don't know if you felt this with the other person, but once you create that kind of connection, then it's possible to share other things that are of meaning. So even though this was just a 5-minute conversation, perhaps after class or beyond this classroom, you can keep going with that person or another person. So taking the chance, the risk to share something that makes you feel vulnerable, to go deep a little bit faster. And it could be something as simple as, hey, today I was thinking about who am I grateful for? I was thinking, I had this strange class and they asked me to think about 2 things I'm grateful for about this person. Then I share this, can I tell you what these 2 things are, who this person is? And that creates a conversation. So sometimes some of these tasks are a good conversation started, even with people that we know, and sometimes even with strangers, somebody in our society or somebody in another class. Of the person that you chose, how many of you shared about a parent? How many is a parent? Okay, parent is a theme. Okay. How many about a very close friend? Close friend? Some. So I strongly recommend to you as an exercise, especially the parents and the good friend people, to do this, to go and express your gratitude. So the last step in this exercise, since we are getting to the break, is this. Some professors force, there's like lots of YouTube videos on this. Let's say, okay, here's a phone, call your parents, tell them exactly, read to them what it is that you wrote. I'm not going to force anybody, but I have to tell you, this is strongly recommended. So if you could, and you have the guts, is to take what it is that you wrote, open your WhatsApp or WeChat or whatever it is that you use, and send this to the other person. I know it could be very, very scary, If some of you did a good friend that you haven't talked to for a long time, some people do that, or somebody who you haven't heard from in years, that is even more scary. You don't want to make them feel worried about you or scare them or anything like that. But usually it comes as a very, very good surprise. Could be very scary to take the step and sending this to the person, but at the end, it's going to be worthwhile. And I'm going to give you a tip in order to help you make this a reality. Sometimes, just like with talking to strangers, you need an excuse. Like, why am I sending this to you right now? Why should I tell you right now that I'm grateful for you? So sometimes you can use me as an excuse. You can just say, my professor, my strange professor in this class told me to do this. So you can just say, my professor instructed me to send this to you as is, right? So if you need an excuse, I'm giving you an excuse. I just have one request. You don't have to follow. If you did this, and some of the students in the previous classes did this, and you got some kind of a reaction, I would be very happy if you could share this with me. Not a must, but I would like to hear from you. So this is my advice to you. Take this from what you've done here, the reflection, the letter that you wrote, put this in your WhatsApp, WeChat, whatever, send this to the other person and see what happens. I think you'll be surprised. Just before we go on the break, I'll tell you that some people do research on this. This is not just a make-believe kind of exercise. There's actual empirical evidence that shows that there's a misalignment between what we think people are going to respond and what people actually respond. So this is very small. So I'll just make this a little bit bigger. It's called the underestimation of reaching out appreciation in relationship closeness. So it seems like with strong ties and with weak ties, how much we think the other person is going to appreciate this. So we think, oh, maybe they won't appreciate this, maybe they won't respond very positively. But generally at the end, when we end up sending these things, and we do this in experimental design in the lab, what happens is that people express a lot of appreciation for these things, especially with ties that haven't been active for very long. So if there's somebody that you haven't heard from in a long time, and suddenly you get this message on WhatsApp or an email, then it just has a very, very good positive experience receiving this. There's a lot of appreciation. So we have experimental evidence that shows these kinds of things, and this seems to be a very solid effect. So this is my suggestion to you. We'll go on a break, take 5 minutes, come back, and then I'll show you some other evidence regarding happiness. 5 minutes. Nice to see that some of the conversations carried on into the break, so that's nice. Good to see. To the point of forgetting about the break. The most popular academic course in the history of academic courses is this course in Yale about happiness. And the person who's giving it is a very well-established academic with a lot of research. Her name is Laurie Santos, and she does the science of happiness. So I'll just play the video to you from Laurie about her tips for happiness. Now, I want you to take everything that you've done in the first task about how do we evaluate information, and I'm going to ask your opinion regarding some of her advice, okay? So listen to her advice and see which of those makes sense to you and how would you go about assessing whether this is solid or not, okay? So here's from Laurie.
We all have these intuitions about the kinds of things that will really make us happy. We think it's more money, material possessions. My students think it's, perfect grades. The sad thing is that the research shows that a lot of those intuitions are just dead wrong. As a professor, I started to see on campus the mental health crisis that we hear so much about in the news, but I was really seeing it in the trenches. Students who were too depressed to function or having panic attacks because they were waiting for their grades or worried about their internships. I just realized that students needed some help to navigate the kind of mental health challenges that they were facing, and I thought the science of psychology really could provide them with some help. I've heard from mothers who've given this class to teens who are really struggling, who are feeling suicidal, and they feel like the tips that they've learned together as a family has really kind of improved things and really helped people who are in really pretty serious mental health crisis. One of my favorite responses that we received was from an elderly learner who wrote and said, I'm in my 80s, this is the first online class I've taken. Even in my 80s, these tips have been helping me, like reminding me to spend more time with my grandkids and to spend more time being social. One of the most common critiques I get when I tell people I teach a class on the science of happiness is, wait, really? That's a science? I mean, when we think of happiness, we often think of something that's kind of ephemeral or even hokey or kind of, granola hippy-dippy stuff. But what separates the platitudes from the scientific version of seeking happiness is the science part. Research shows the kinds of things we really can be doing.
Okay, so she's going now into 7, what she calls rewirements, that you can try in order for you to become happier. So we're going to go through these, but think about these. Do these make sense to you? What do you know about these things? Does this seem like something that you would benefit from exercising in your life? And she bases this on her review of the literature regarding what is scientific evidence regarding happiness. So here's the 7 rewirements from Laurie Santos. Ready? Here we go. So think this is something you already experienced here in the class. Talk to a stranger.
By that, we just mean make a social connection, like talk to someone who's in line with you at the coffee shop or someone who's near you on your commute. Many of us feel lonely all the time, which is surprising because we're often around other people. We just don't try to make a connection with them. There's tons of scientific evidence that meditation has a host of positive effects. Meditation can help you improve your concentration, not just when you're meditating, but even afterwards. But more importantly, meditation can improve your mood.
I just want to say that here at HKU, we have some faculty, especially in the education psychology section of psychology, that is very well invested in this, and they've done a big scale project trying to bring meditation to schools in Hong Kong, to sit together with kids and help them establish this. So we've done a few meetings, and we start the meeting by a bell, ringing the bell, which goes on for about 2 minutes, and then you're supposed to meditate and focus on your breathing and the moment.
The technique that can help us stop mind wandering, this act of thinking about all these other things that aren't going on in the here and now. We think having more choices makes us happier. This is another spot where our mind is wrong. We'd be better off restricting our choices and even limiting our freedom. It will improve our well-being much more than we expect. Every time we stick in an external reward into an activity we otherwise enjoyed, it makes us enjoy that activity less. It makes us less likely we'll do that activity in the absence of a reward, and it kind of steals our joy. We forget that the quick 5 minutes it's going to take to reconnect with someone we care about is going to boost our mood incredibly. It's going to reduce our loneliness and just make us feel more connected to the people we really care about. Research shows that jotting down 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for just every night can statistically improve your well-being in as short as 2 weeks. So if you want to feel better mentally and to feel better physically, you need to get some shut-eye. The recommended amount is 7 to 8 hours a night, and it's best if you do it with a little bit of sleep hygiene. Get rid of the phones before you go to bed, and really try to go to sleep at the same hour every night. It feels a little bit old-fashioned, but it's the kind of thing that can start boosting your mood immediately.
So these are the tips from the most popular course in the history of academic courses by Laurie Santos in Yale. It's a free course, so you can go and you can join that. If you want this to be more than just a session on happiness, you're welcome to join and see the kind of evidence that she goes into. Of all the 7 tips that she discussed, her top 7, which seems the most important to you? Which one is the number 1? What is the most important thing for our happiness? Connecting with other people. Yeah. Why is that your guess, if I may ask? Yeah, we're social animals. Social connection is something that's very important in your life. So very good. So that's a good guess in terms of the evidence that I've seen. So definitely social connection is something that we really care about. So these are the top ones for her. I'm going to briefly summarize my view of Laurie's review. So talking to a stranger, meditate, reduce number of choices. So I would say, even though we did this in this classroom, and it's something that I generally recommend to you, I think it's a little bit overhyped. Generally, the effects that I see are small, and it really depends on the person. So they measure this in commute in Chicago. Whether you talk to somebody that's next to you on the train, trying to talk to somebody on the MTR, especially if you're a foreigner, is not easy in Hong Kong. So I don't know how culturally transferable these things are. And I think there's a lot of context, and it depends on individual differences. Meditation, I really think that's way overhyped. I think people don't even understand what the word meditation is. Some people look at the Buddhist origins. Many people have different definitions. I think there's a problem with defining what meditation actually is and what it's supposed to focus on and what the health benefits are supposed to be. I think it's just super messy. Every time I look at this literature and these findings, I just realize this is an utter mess. That this is the most messy literature that we have when it comes to happiness. Reducing choices, I would say this is very, very tricky, and the literature is problematic. So we had a big book and a TED Talk by Barry Schwartz. This is one of the things that you can choose as a topic for your second assignment, but the evidence does not seem to support that this is in fact the case. Call a friend and keep a gratitude journal. As we've seen in the class exercise, I do think that there's some evidence for that. So this is an emerging evidence. Social connections are important. Feeling gratitude, especially gratitude towards a person, is something that seems important. But my number one, which I think is the most important because this is a basic ingredient in your life. Without it, you cannot function, is sleep. And I think especially undergraduates, me in my undergraduate, I barely slept, but it's the most important thing that you can do for yourself. So if you're not sleeping your 7 hours a night, this is something that I would strongly suggest that you prioritize. And if you're feeling over anxious and stressed over having a lot of negative things, when it comes to happiness in your life, I would say the first investment, the biggest investment, is in sleeping more. My general advice to you, based on how I read the literature, and hopefully you can help me by, in your second assignment, telling me what you believe are the most credible things, are sleep, work-life balance. I've experienced work-life balance in many different cultures. I've lived in Taiwan, Hong Kong. I've lived in the Netherlands, in the US, and where I grew up in Israel. And I would generally say that Hong Kong and the US are very extreme in their very bad work-life balance, emphasizing work, overworking, and not having enough balance with personal time. So even before you reach out to others is whether you have time to re-energize. The ones that really get this done well are the Dutch. The Dutch are unbelievable. So I've really learned how to refocus my life when I lived in the Netherlands. Seems like everybody around me was just very well adjusted. And some people will say, oh, of course, but they're not as good as us. They're not as productive as us. They're not as prolific when it comes to academia. But the Dutch are very productive, very prolific, and they do this with less hours regarding work. And it seems like having the balance with, having a work-life balance, having a balance with their lives with family and with friends seems to amplify their productivity when they do actually work. Making it easy for you to choose well. We're going to talk a little bit about this in future sessions about self-nudging. How do you set up habits for yourself? So for example, if you want to eat more healthy, just make sure that there are more healthy things in your fridge, or that it's more difficult for you to reach the things that are not healthy. If there are people who are toxic in your life, then putting some barriers between them and you is something that helps you protect. So it's not only connecting to the people that you love and are positive in your life, but also being able to protect yourselves from bad things in your life, bad actors, bad influences, all of that. Money, I did a whole session on this in the other course, Judgment and Decision Making. It's going to be posted, the video, very soon, so you can go and visit that. So generally, we tend to think that money is going to make us happier, but actually, there are much better ways to spend money than just buying things for yourself. So spending money in order to buy time, so this balance between money and time. Right now, you might think money is the thing that I need the most, but actually time is the thing that increasingly with age, you'll realize is the thing that we're running out of. So if there's a specific task that you really, really don't like and it makes you miserable, you can pay somebody else to do that for you. So for example, if it's, I don't know, taking care of the laundry or washing the dishes or any kind of other task that you can afford to pay somebody else to do this, then it's a good investment to do this. During my thesis, when I was a student, one of the things that I had to do is that I did a thesis, so I needed to collect some data, and it was very, very time demanding for me to go to the library and give people surveys and beg them, can you please do that for me? Actually, what I ended up doing, and that really contributed to my happiness, is paying somebody else to go around the library and collect the data for me. And then I could focus on other things. And actually, I could make a lot more money doing my own thing rather than going around the library for the money that I paid that person. So sometimes the way that we think about money is a little bit misaligned. Things that we need more evidence, talking to strangers, spending money on others, and so forth. One thing that I want to show you is some students write to me or they say to me, it's great that you're doing this course on session on happiness, but we want to know, do you experience this in your life? Do you implement any of this advice in your life in Hong Kong? So I want to show you that I really try. So I don't just preach this to you or advocate this to you to find work-life balance or to make social connection. So when you ask me, do you walk the talk? So I want to show you how I try to do this. And I started doing this during the pandemic. So I have a Twitter now called X account where I share with others my academic achievements. I've never shared anything personal with people on Twitter aside from this. So I started this thread. It started during the pandemic when we were all stuck in Hong Kong and couldn't leave and go anywhere. So I decided that in order to maintain my sanity, I'm going to do 2 or 3 hikes a week. So I think we don't appreciate just how wonderful Hong Kong is. Hong Kong is one of the most beautiful cities. There's no city like Hong Kong that offers this balance between urban insanity and all these skyscrapers and just 5-10 minutes away, there are all these beaches and wonderful hikes. So I've started documenting this. I'll just show you, I'll open the link and show you just how far I've come after doing this for a while. Yeah, so you'll see I'm at number 112. So this is from Mount Nicholson here, Hong Kong Island. So that's like 10 minutes away. Tai Mo Shan, if you haven't been to Tai Mo Shan, the highest peak in Hong Kong, this is highly recommended. If you're feeling lazy and you don't want to climb the 1,000 meters, you can even take a taxi almost all the way to the top, right? There's still 200 meters you need to go up. But from the top of the world, you'll see some amazing, amazing things. This is just like remarkable to see this. But when I post these things, so this is kind of like a junk boat. I don't know how much students do this, but this is a thing that expats like to do. They take a junk boat and they go on to some of the islands. So we do this occasionally. But I started to do this, and when I posted this on Twitter, nobody cares about my academic papers, but every time I post something about Hong Kong, people are like, oh my gosh, Hong Kong is that beautiful. So when is the next conference in Hong Kong? And what people don't realize is that really 5 minutes, 10 minutes taxi from here, from HKU, it's just beautiful nature. If you want a beach, you can go to Repulse Bay. If you want a world-class level hike, you can go to Dragon's Back. There's so many things that you can do just minutes away. If you want something a little bit more secluded, half an hour, take a ferry from Central Piers, and you're in one of these Cheng Chau Island, Peng Chau Island, Lama Island. There's so many things that you can do. So this is just like my perspective on this, and I really try to balance this. So work-life balance is really important. As much as I have tasks for the class and as much as I have academic activities, I try to make this a priority. It's not to boast, it's not to impress you or anything like that. It's just to tell you that there's a different way to doing things than just working all the time and stressing yourself out. You need to identify the activities that are good for you and then invest in those, make those a priority so that you can protect yourself. Another very good episode from Science Versus about sleep. How do we get more? So Laurie talked a little bit about that. So for example, one of the things that I did is I have this tracker on my arm. So I wasn't sleeping enough. So now I know how much I'm sleeping. Sometimes this can cause more stress. So I know people who put the tracker on and then just put it aside because they saw how little they're sleeping and they couldn't do anything about this. But this has helped me see how much I sleep and how good my level of sleep is. And you can get something, Xiaomi is just 150 Hong Kong, which is absolutely ridiculous for this level of technology. And I've actually asked, we have sleep labs here at HKU. You can participate in the sleep lab. If you don't want this tracker, just participate, sign up as a participant. You'll even get paid. You get to sleep in a hotel here at HKU, and they'll just hook you up. And at the end, they'll give you an analysis of how good your sleep is, and you also contribute to research. Either buy a tracker or go participate in some of these, but invest in your sleep. This is just a general diagram from one of the biggest studies regarding sleep on how, so 7-8 hours seems to be the best thing, but anything less than that, but sometimes even more than that, can cause more stress for you. Here's a summary. So when I ask you in your tasks to evaluate whether information has evidence behind it, what I'm asking you to do is to search for articles. You can see in the book, some teams wrote about this, to identify articles that seem to have credible scientific evidence. And credible scientific evidence sometimes means go and look at somebody who did something systematic that looked at an entire literature and has identified what works and what doesn't work. So here's an example. Elizabeth Dunn over here is a very famous happiness researcher, and she has done this research regarding what works and what doesn't work. And it seems like she was looking at nature exposure and mindfulness and all of that, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of credible evidence over there. And when she talks about credible evidence, she talks about well-powered, pre-registered studies that have been conducted again and again, replicated again and again in many labs around the world. So the best evidence that we have that are sufficiently powered and pre-registered have to do with social interaction, just like the guest that we had here, and gratitude. So it seems like these are the emerging trends of what leads us to happiness, and their evidence seems to be better than some of the other overhyped evidence regarding mindfulness or meditation and all of the other things in there. So going to one of these articles and seeing how they evaluate the literature. Another thing that I would like to suggest to you, we have something like that coming up in Hong Kong, I think in December. How many of you have heard of Burning Man? Burning Man? Some of you have? Yeah. Good. So one of the coolest studies that I've seen come out of social psychology, I'm very jealous of these people. They just went to Burning Man many times and they talked to people about what is it that they experienced over there and asked them to sign up as study participants, and they kept track of them for many months afterward. And they wanted to see whether having an experience of participating in something like Burning Man changes your perspective about things and makes you happier. So they call this secular multi-day mass gatherings. I don't know why it's called like that, but let me just show you what Burning Man looks like. I'll just say the way that this happens is that people come in and build art together. So nothing exists there before people come in. People come in, work together, bring their art forms, and work together in order to offer something. So whatever it is that you do, you can offer something to somebody else. I know scholars, scientists, professors who go there and give like TED Talks. Some people just do sessions like therapy. They sit down with others. Some people just listen. I know coaches who go there and give coaching sessions. You can do whatever you want. Whatever your art is, whatever your profession is, you can do this. And some remarks. This is the Burning Man. At the end, they burned this in order to celebrate the end of this. But it's usually done in the desert in Nevada. Anybody can sign in and it's not just for party people. I know this is kind of people who know about Burning Man. I think it's just for party people. You can be an introvert and you don't want to connect to anybody else. That's completely okay. You can still go there and have fun. If you think this is too commercialized or too extreme or too big. So I just want to show you that people even do research on this. So if you feel like doing cool research, you can go to Clock and Flap and ask some people if they want to participate. I'll just say that what they found out is that many, many days afterwards, so I don't know if you can see this, but they did an immediate follow-up and then 6 months follow-up, and they show that this has been a transformative experience. Just attending this and being together with others in a place like the desert, doing art together or listening to music together has really had a long-term impact. And the amazing thing about this is as time passed, the impact tended to increase rather than decrease. And people who attend things like Burning Man tend to build long-lasting connections that go well beyond the actual event. So I recommend this to you, a very interesting paper published. Prosociality, let me see how we're doing. Okay, so we have a little bit more time. Spending money on others. So this is, once again, Elizabeth Dunn. I'm going to introduce her to you. This is from her TED Talk. So it's a bit like, this is one of the TED Talks that you can analyze if you want. This is some of the things that she writes based on a science paper. Not a lot of social psychologists get to publish in science. So this is what she writes.
In other words, people don't spend their money right. So, armed with my newfound wealth and a team of graduate students, I wanted to figure out how people could use their money better. In particular, I wondered whether people might actually get more happiness from spending their money on others rather than on themselves. Now, to test this, I had to make a little money fall from the sky. So we went out on campus and just handed people either a $5 or a $20 bill randomly in the morning, and we asked them to spend this money by 5 p.m. that day. Now, we told some people, hey, we want you to spend this money on yourself. We told others, we want you to spend this money on someone else. So what did people do when they found themselves with this bit of extra cash? Well, when we told people to spend the money on themselves, they did things like buying earrings, eyeshadow, and food or drink for themselves. By contrast, when we told them to spend money on someone else, they did things like buying toys for younger siblings, making donations to charity, as well as buying food or drink for friends. So the question is, which type of spending will leave people happier at the end of the day? Well, when we called people back that night, participants who had been told to spend the money on somebody else were significantly happier than those who'd spent the money on themselves.
So this really went viral. So when I asked you at the beginning, how would you spend 50 Hong Kong dollars if you have a chance to increase your happiness? Elizabeth argues it would be best for you, rather than spending this on food for yourself, spending on food that you experience with others or buy others food, and then you'll be happier, right? So this is a science paper, so it made a lot of waves and got very viral. But I want to share with you how to analyze and think about this kind of thing. So of course, when I see a paper like that, which sounds very appealing, I want to make sure it's solid. So first I open the science paper, and it's from March 2008. I just want to show you that already when I opened it, there was a little bit in very small letters, something that was written over there. I'm just going to share this with you because I want to show you that this happens even when you publish in something like Science. We recently identified a bug in statistical package SPSS 14 that was used to analyze our data. The bug causes the first line of data to overwrite the sixth line of data. The bug affected the data set for our study, n equals 16, n equals 60. Primarily because of this error decreased the variance in our dataset. Correcting this error alters the critical statistical test such that instead of p-value lower than 0.02, it becomes p lower than 0.0115. The corrected dataset is available from the first author's website. Wow, what is that? And how many people are affected by this bug from SPSS? When people read the science paper, do they go and read this little note over there? They don't. I've looked at many citations and nobody mentions this little bug over here. It's not as credible as we would like it to be. Is this strong? Is this valid? So when we see this kind of thing, what should we do? We look for replications, right? So I was looking for replications, and what I found, and I'm very happy about this, is that actually the same team, once they realized there's something called a replication crisis and a science reform and all the things that I've talked about in previous sessions, they decided, so you can see over here Elizabeth Dunn, together with Lara Aknin and Michael Norton, so big names who did the first one. So you can see Lara Aknin and Michael Norton. So 3 of the original ones decided that they're going to do a replication. And instead of doing a very small sample, they're going to be a very large sample with 3 different studies. When you do 3 different studies in a replication where everything is pre-registered and everything is clear and all the open data and code and materials, what do you find? You find that some things work. So for example, here you can see that in their first experiment, they had 712 students were randomly assigned, and then they found an effect. I don't know if you remember Cohen's d and the effect sizes, but a Cohen's d of 0.36 is not bad for social psychology. It's actually considered to be a middle, an average effect, a middle effect, right? So not very strong, not as strong as they claimed before, but a middle effect is still better than nothing. But what happens when you run this again? So here we have 1,950 adults did not report greater happiness. And what happens when we run this again with a sample of 5,199? We had a very, very weak effect from 0.03 to 0.06, which I consider to be negligible. So on one side, we have 1 study that seems to have some kind of an effect and 2 studies that don't have any kind of an effect. So a big problem. And what I appreciate about this is that it was conducted by the same authors. It was conducted as a registered report. So everything here is as transparent as could be. So from the overhyped science paper with the data bug that we did TED Talks on, like the one that I just showed you, when we go to credible evidence, we see that things are a little bit more murky, right? So we need to be very, very humble about this. So when I see this kind of thing, I say, okay, great. How about a meta-analysis? So 1 replication is okay. It's great that it's a registered report. It's also great that it's done by the original authors. But what I also want to see is how it's done by other people and how it's done looking at the entire literature. So what we see over here is this team, not the same team, that did a meta-analysis. So we can look at this. When you have a meta-analysis, you aggregate all of the studies together, 200,000 people from 201 different studies. And what they found is a correlation of 0.13. It's not a very strong correlation, but it's a decent correlation. So actually, it does seem like there's some kind of an effect there. So it seems like being prosocial and spending money on others does contribute to some extent to your well-being. Not a very strong effect, not an overwhelming effect. I don't know if it requires a TED Talk or a big book, but it's something that we should communicate to others. So now we have evidence from a registered report, partial evidence, mixed evidence, and then we have some weak evidence. So we have good evidence regarding a weak effect on meta-analysis, right? So this is good. How about cross-cultural evidence? So perhaps there's something about culture that mediates this. So it's the same team So I don't know if you can see this, but this is once again Lara Aknin and Elizabeth Dunn, and probably Norton is here. Yeah, Michael Norton is also here. So they investigate this cross-culturally, and they claim that they don't find any differences between the different countries. But in a later report, the first one was conducted a while back in 2013. In a later report, they actually say, okay, so there might be some cultural differences, and they map those out. And then they say, it depends. There are some moderators. So in the beginning, we thought, okay, this applies to everybody. Then we realized, oh, it's complex. Now that we realize that it's complex, we need to identify some moderators. So these are the moderators, and they say, what is likely to contribute to your well-being is if you're free to choose how to help, if you feel connected to the people that you're helping, and then you can see how this is making a difference. So if you just give money away, you buy something for someone, but you don't see their reaction, or you don't know how this changed something, it's not as meaningful to you. So what I take away from this is rather than you spending money on others, it's more a story of meaning. Does it feel meaningful to you? Do you feel like you've contributed to the other person? Do you feel like you've made them happy? Right? So it's a more complex story. So the original story is not completely lost. There's something meaningful in there, but you need to reframe it into something that is the core. And the core is that the meaning that it gives to you. Okay? So there's a lot more going on over there. So they continued by doing, so you can hear them talking about this in a podcast session. Once again, Elizabeth Dunn, looking at under what conditions does pro-social spending promote happiness. And she has identified all kinds of different aspects. So more moderators, for example, when they felt a sense of social connection to the person or the cause, and when they felt a decision to help was freely chosen. So that's nice. Now the team is moving on to identify what is it about the context and how to increase the effect of these studies. And once again here, they summarize in a meta-analysis, and they claim, and this is a big claim, the emotional rewards of pro-social spending are robust and replicable in large samples. So they give this kind of evidence. But you should still be wary because it's still the same scholars. So you also want to look at another meta-analysis, and you want to look at another group of scholars. So literature on happiness is mixed and it is complex. So in your task, I want you to look at not the first science paper that comes out when you do a Google Scholar, but even when you see evidence, science paper, it's amazing, it must work. Not necessarily. Read the fine print, look for replications, look for independent scholars that are not affiliated with that finding, look for meta-analysis, and look for moderators. Okay? So this is your main task. From these amazing TED Talks where everything seems to work and you must implement this in order to make yourself happy, like what is actually going on? What is the story actually about? Right. So, for example, they have identified a moderator of age. So some ages work better than others. Delayed negative effects. So there's all sorts of other things and trends about predictors in the lifespan. I won't go into this. I'll just summarize with this. These are my general recommendations to try and summarize this entire session. We went over a few topics very, very briefly. But at the end, I think happiness for a lot of us is associated with meaning, whether this has meaning for you. So meaning is something that a lot of the things that are overhyped can be reframed into meaning. If meditation gives you meaning, then that's a good thing. It will increase your happiness. If talking to a stranger gives you meaning, then it will increase your happiness. So meaning is the core across all the activities that do seem to have solid evidence. I do think that something very important in your lives that students don't have enough of is work-life balance. So I know that you're stressed and you need to work a lot and you have a lot of tasks and pressures from family and from within, from yourself, but do try to protect yourself by having more balance. If something about this course is stressing you out, please communicate this to me. I am very happy to try and elevate your stress and accommodate you. In terms of happiness, what works the best, I think, is forming happiness habits. You know yourselves best. If investing in food or investing in works for you, then make sure that this is a habit for you. So if there's something that you know that is going to elevate you from stress, then make that into your schedule. If it's hiking, great. If it's spending time with your family, great. Just put this on your schedule and make this a habit so that there's something to balance all that stress. So connect to others who give you joy, learn to set boundaries and control negative interactions. So not all interactions are positive. Some interactions are very stressful. Be able to set boundaries and tell yourself to disconnect or disengage from things that do not do good for you. So generally for the next task, my main request to you and the important note that I have for you at the end is there are lots of happiness gurus. Positive psychology is filled with all kinds of findings. Here at HKU, we try and promote mindfulness to little kids in all kinds of schools in Hong Kong, but a lot of it is overhyped. Our task together in the next project that you have is to figure out what is the solid evidence regarding happiness so that we together can implement this in our lives and to help others. So carefully check the information and carefully check the evidence. If you're not sure how to do this, you have the teaching assistants and you have me to help you. Just post on Zulip and we'll do what we can to help. Okay? So that's it for this week. I'll see you next week. Thank you.